fresh and a very wonderful morning to one and all present here. Myself Zainab Kagdi from Atmiya Green School, Jadeshwar, Bharuch. We are back with English subject for class 8. And today we are going to continue the lesson Unit 4 Unlikely Destination Section 1, that is Emperors on Ice. We have already learned few things about this lesson, that this is about an adventurous journey that later came to be known as the worst journey of the world. So this is the story of these three people, that is Dr. Edward Wilson, Apsley Cherry Garrard and Lieutenant Henry Robertson. So they were in search of the emperor penguin's eggs. Okay, so they had to face many difficulties in order to win this prize. So for that they took out so much of pain. They had to suffer with the early winters. They have to spend nights in the darkness of the winter, and that way they survived. Moving ahead to the story, the trio that you can see in the picture, that they had to go to the Cape Crozier. There the Cherry writes that he would have given his 5 years of his life for just spending one night in a warm bed. Dr. Edward Wilson, who instigated the 6-week trip in the depths of Antarctic winter, later described it as the weirdest bird nesting expedition that has ever been or ever will be. So here we have completed till here. There Captain Scott started planning his second expedition aboard Terra Nova, and Terra Nova is the name of the ship. So here Terra Nova set sail towards Cape Crozier in the early 1911, but bad weather caused severe delay of the expedition, and they experienced pack ice. Pack ice means large mass of ice formed from smaller pieces. And when entering the Ross Sea, they were already running considerably behind schedule. So whatever dates they had planned to reach a particular point, they were already behind that time. As a result, the ship was ordered into the McMurdo Strait. Scott's team had arrived at Ross Island on 4th January 1911 and quickly established their base at Cape Evans, hauling their supplies over the ice to their base for the next 2 years' work. Prefabricated. Prefabricated means made in parts that can be assembled later. So it's like a folding thing. Okay. So the prefabricated hut was erected to serve as their home, and a number of meteorological and magnetic stations were established by the team to collect data. Scott was determined to use the remaining days of sunlight to explore the region and make a start on the scientific program. On 23rd April 1911, the sun set for the winter, and the men at the main base settled into their routines, taking scientific measurements, preparing equipment, and exercising the dogs and ponies. So here you can see that how they were facing different difficulties, how they were just rushing there. Scott's team had arrived at Ross Island on 4th of January 1911, and they quickly established their base at Cape Evans, hauling their supplies over the ice to their base for the next 2 years' work. So the three British men, they were Wilson, Birdie Bowers and Apsley Cherry Garrard, set out from their base camp at Cape Evans at midday on 27th June 1911. So here, dear students, you can see that how these three British men, that is Wilson, Birdie and Cherry, these all of them set out from their base camp at Cape Evans at midnight just to find out those three eggs. They walked out with 2 sleds of food and equipment, left base camp and trucked into a freezing, pitch black, gale battered nightmare, Cape Crozier, that was about 120 kilometers away. The average temperature as they plodded on was minus 60 degrees Fahrenheit, and it fell as low as minus 77 degrees. The thick, cloying snow. Cloying means annoying because there is too much snow. The snow is compared with the annoyance. That is, the annoying snow meant they could only pull one sled at a time. So they had to proceed in relay, gaining only 1 mile for every 3 they walked. It was pitch black, and the three had to navigate by candlelight and the stars. So there was complete darkness around them, and the only light they get to find out their way, to find out the direction was the candlelight and the stars. They took turns falling into crevasses. In the words of Apsley Cherry Garrard, the moon was showing a ghastly, ragged mountainous edge above us in the fog, and we found that we were on a pressure ridge. We stopped, looked at one another, and then bang, right under our feet. More bangs and creaks and groans, for that ice was moving and splitting like glass, and the cracks went off all round us, and some of them ran along for hundreds of yards. So here you can see, dear students, that the moon was ghastly ragged mountainous edge above us in a fog. It was shining that night, and we found that we were on a pressure ridge. We stopped there and looked at one another, and then bang, they were right under their feet. So there was pus in their blistered frostbite. Their teeth cracked. They feared breaking bones. The impact on the man was horrific, and as Cherry's biographer Sarah Wheeler notes, it took him 45 minutes to chip his way into his sleeping bag each night, as during the day it froze flat like a slab of tombstone granite. So the sleeping bag they were wearing, I'll show you in the video. Next, I'll show you the video. In that, you can see how they survived their life, how they survived the winter nights and days in that sleeping bag. The sleeping bag took him used to take 45 minutes to chip his way into his sleeping bag each night, as because of the so much of cold it froze. That sleeping bag used to froze flat like a slab of tombstone granite. At Cape Crozier, they built a rock igloo to serve as a field laboratory to study the penguins. Okay, so as like a field laboratory, they wanted some like office, so they built a igloo. Okay, igloo is generally we find when we see the movie, we can see that igloo is the house of penguins, correct? So they formed that igloo that is made out of the ice. So in order to complete their studies as a field laboratory, they had to study. In order to study the penguins, they built a rock igloo. It was from here that they made their way onto the sea ice and became the first man to witness the midwinter breeding of the emperor penguin. Emperors may be easy to like, but they aren't quite so easy to find, let alone study. They mostly breed in inaccessible places and in the darkness of winter, so their colonies have not been easy to locate. The explorers reached the emperor penguin rookery by climbing the huge walls of ice that surrounded it, and they snatched 5 eggs. Cherry dropped 2 eggs as they struggled back to the igloo. But this was not the end of their misery. Then they became trapped in a particular violent blizzard. Then, as they reached their target, the tent blew away, and the igloo roof followed. So what happened, dear students? They successfully found out the emperor penguins, and they just brought 5 eggs. Among them, two were broken at that time only. So now again, when they came back, their tent blew away first, and then the igloo roof also followed. So for whole 2 days, they remained bundled in their sleeping bags, clinging to life and beneath a growing snowdrift, without food or cover, until there was a lull in the blizzard and Bowers found their tent. Our lives had been taken away and given back to us, Cherry wrote. Incredible, but true. On 1st August 1911, the trio finally staggered back to base camp, their faces blistered and scared, clutching their precious load of 3 eggs. They had spent 6 weeks in the Antarctic winter traveling from Cape Evans to Cape Crozier to gather rare emperor penguin eggs from their natural habitat. Their frozen clothes had to be cut from their bodies. Cherry's teeth chattered so violently that they shattered, while Wilson was blinded in one eye. Cherry looked about 30 years older than he had when he had set off. His cadaverous means very pale and sick. So his cadaverous face, very pale and very sick face, scared and corrugated nose dark, means wrinkled and scattered nose dark, eyes dull, and hands white and wrinkled. His toenails were falling off and his fingers were useless. Wrote Sarah Beeler that they had been successful. Cherry, who had no scientific training, took responsibility for the eggs and presented them to the Natural History Museum in 1913. Although emperor penguins have been known to science since 1840, the first colony wasn't discovered until these members of the Antarctic expedition found the birds at Cape Crozier. I handed over the Cape Crozier embryos, which nearly cost 3 men their lives and cost 1 man his health, Cherry later wrote to the museum. After all was said and done, Wilson and Scott froze to death on the return trip from the South Pole. Cherry Garrard brought the eggs to the American Museum of Natural History. There, a supremely unimpressed curator elegantly greeted him with a sneer. Who are you? What do you want? These are not an egg shop. The eggs were then kept in storage while occasional scientists were asked to study them, but it was difficult to find the right specialist. Eventually, in 1934, the zoologist C.W. Parsons analyzed them and concluded that they did not greatly add to our understanding of penguin embryology. For good measure, scientists no longer believe that embryos help much in studying a species' evolutionary history. However, Russell added that the specimens were used in a later study of emperor penguins and were reckoned to be useful. Ultimately, though, they did not provide the information that was hoped for them. On the other hand, they are still here for more study and reinterpretation. In that sense, they are invaluable. The worst journey in the world, as Cherry was later to name their trip, had been completed. This ordeal was immortalized in Apsley Cherry Garrard's The Worst Journey in the World, one of the most popular travel books ever written. And this winter journey was immortalized as one of the most astonishing journeys to be successfully executed throughout the heroic age of Antarctic exploration. So here, dear students, you can see that for whatsoever intentions they went to find out to take that embryo penguin eggs, Okay, the emperor penguin's eggs. But later, for whatsoever reason they were asked for, that was not satisfied. Okay, because they were not helpful, so the scientists did not ask for it. But later they reinterpreted it, and they found them invaluable. But for the reason for which they were brought were not being fulfilled, for that reason this is called as the worst journey in the world. I hope you understood the story. You can read the story to understand it in a better way. For your better understanding, I'll be showing you a video. So kindly watch the whole video and enjoy it.
Crozier. They built a rock igloo to serve as a field laboratory to study the penguins. It was from here that they made their way onto the sea ice and became the first men to witness the midwinter breeding of the emperor penguin. Emperors may be easy to like, but they aren't quite so easy to find, let alone study. They mostly breed in inaccessible places and in the darkness of winter, so their colonies haven't. The explorers reached the emperor penguin rookery by climbing the huge walls of ice that surrounded it, and they snatched 5 eggs. Cherry dropped 2 as they struggled back to the igloo. But this was not the end of their misery. They then became trapped in a particularly violent blizzard. Then, as they reached their target, their tent blew away first, and the igloo roof followed. For 2 days they remained bundled in their sleeping bags, clinging to life beneath a growing snowdrift, without food or cover, until there was a lull in the blizzard and Bowers found their tent. Our lives had been taken away and given back to us, Cherry wrote. Incredible but true, on the 1st of August 1911, the trio finally staggered back to base camp, their faces blistered and scarred, clutching their precious load of 3 eggs. They had spent 6 weeks in the Antarctic winter, traveling from Cape Evans to Cape Crozier to gather rare emperor penguin eggs from their natural habitat.